We okay? We're doing okay on time? We got to let people get seated, or you want me to go ahead? Okay. It's my pleasure to introduce Derek Peterson, who's the Chief Technology Officer of Boingo Wireless. Boingo and Cisco have been working together over the past few years, building out joint offers to serve the wireless industry. For those of you who don't know, if you arrived in LAX, you'll find that a Boingo Cisco offering there is enabling the airport. We also work together in stadiums such as Atlanta, as well on new stadium offerings to provide high-speed wireless capabilities to the sports and entertainment environment. In terms of overall, Derek's background is he has a BS in engineering, specifically computer science from the University of Maryland. His MA is in education and technology from American Intercontinental University, and a PhD in computer science from Colorado International Institute of Strategic Information. That's a mouthful. And so when you think about someone who's really a multifaceted individual and capable person, Derek certainly comes to mind as someone who brings a tremendous wealth and a diverse background of knowledge, education, and experience into this industry. While he's got his academic credentials, which are enormous, he also defies the stereotype of a typical university professor with a tweed jacket, and I'm surprised you didn't wear your tweed today. He's an avid Harley rider, for those of you, the motorcycle of the United States, Harley-Davidson, a licensed scuba diver, and a skydiver. In fact, when each of his kids turn 18 years old, he takes his kids skydiving with him. I don't know what that's meant to prove or test, but I'm sure it's a lot of fun together as a bonding experience, more or less. And Derek is very serious about his job, specifically the network of the future. Not only is he building it and what Boingo is doing, and you'll hear a lot about how they're approaching this whole area of mobility and services, but he literally is living it every day, as I understand it, Derek. And last time we were together, you didn't show me this specific device. But earlier this year, just before Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, Derek had a near-field communication chip embedded into his hand. So if those of you think that we're being monitored by an external agency, you have to check with Derek first to see if that's the case. So please welcome to the stage Boingo CTO and a living part of the Internet of Everything, Derek Peterson.
All right, so it's, I have to flip the little switch. Here we go. All right. So you got me. Good. Well, it's great to be here. You know, I enjoyed the previous panel, hearing about the Internet of Things. As he shares, I'm kind of having fun with technology, as I always have my whole life, and I'll share some stories about that later on. But let me first talk about what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about these converged networks. I heard from the panel earlier about how they were talking about you have to deploy everything. You know, is it LoRa? Is it small cells? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it DAS? And for the answer to all of that, in our opinion, at Boingo, and definitely in my opinion, having done satellites before with Iridium and in the military, basically one of my jobs was to try to bring communication in the middle of anywhere. So, you know, when I was running around in the military, sometimes you didn't have the advent of certain communication technology, and you just had to find the right technology, any technology, and make it happen. And that's kind of what we're doing at Boingo, is we're moving that, and we're just keep moving that along, taking advantage of this converged networks and all of the different technologies. I'm going to go through that. So the first slide I have here, and I'm trying to be a little bit of a rock star here, so I'll just kind of share with this. We have a stage set, so we have all the different technologies out there available for us to take advantage, right? So we have small cells, we have DAS, we have digital radio systems, we have Wi-Fi. They're all there and available for us to take advantage. So the stage is set. We have that stage set. Now the key thing is to get the people up there next to the mics and harmonize and make it work together. Connecting the dots and making the technology actually work together is where I'm having fun right now at Boingo, and trying to really push it along and be able to connect those dots. So I'm going to talk about how we're taking action and doing that and connecting those dots at Boingo. But first I want to cover a couple things. First, a few things. I'm going to talk about the accelerating consumption, what's happening with the consumption models and how that's changing the way we have to think. One of the questions was, well, should I use LoRa to be able to provide connectivity for these low-power devices and some of these M2M devices? I would say, of course, you should. And each technology is required because the accelerating consumption that's happening means we're going to need all of them. And part of that is disruptive innovations moving things along. So we need to make sure that we're realizing that the innovation is happening and be disruptive about it. And then finally, we're going to talk about networking's next big wave. So I wanted to hit some numbers first, just so we can go all level set. So when you think about venues, 75% of venues have mobile phones in them. And I'm going to show you another slide showing you what they're doing. And it's an example right here in LA that you can see at Hollywood Bowl. And just think about all the different things that people are doing when they're there. 97% of travelers are using mobile devices, and they're using more than one. The average person carries between 2 and 3 different mobile devices. And then 85% of college students are also using mobile devices. We want to pay attention to what those college students are doing because, of course, they're that next generation that's coming up and going to be changing the way we use technology today. In addition to that, there's this huge thing that Forrester wrote, and if you haven't read Mobile Mindshift, it's a really good book that was put out a couple years ago, talking about how we're moving towards this mobile generation. Back when I started at Boingo as the CTO, one of the things that we saw is Wi-Fi changing from being used strictly as a technology on computers, so people would come in, sit down, open up a computer and sit there and use it, to being moving to mobile. When I look back, we used to have about something like 10 or 15% of mobile devices connecting. Now it's 60% or more of mobile devices connecting. And that interconnection and the apps and the services and everything else that's on those devices continues to grow. You know, it used to be we'd look and see what the devices are, the applications people were running on our systems, and it's gone from, 5 or 6 or 10 different things, and it's just really ballooned to all kinds of people using different things. And that brings us, of course, to this mobile data explosion that Cisco, Steve kind of shared with you a little bit, and from their VNI. 24 billion network devices connecting, 77% of internet traffic is video. We talked about that. There's different applications being used. So we've got video is a very important application. You're not going to use LoRa for video, at least not today, maybe sometime in the future. So you have to recognize that depending on the application being used, you're going to need a different technology to be able to deliver those applications and those services to those individuals. 10.5 billion M2M devices or machine-to-machine devices kind of makes you think that, yes, there is a solution for these other technologies out there as well. So the key thing that we have to realize is involved in all of this is the consumer. I remember when I was getting my PhD at Colorado Tech, and I had this professor that I went to, and some of you probably heard this story because I share it every once in a while. And my professor was one of those people who helped involve in getting the internet going and was real big into Second Life. And this professor said, we had a course and we had to sit here and go try to build stuff in Second Life. Has anybody here played Second Life? Or I call it played Second Life. Some people think it's a religion and it's like you're living in this internet world, right? It's like, think of it as like Minecraft, but there's businesses inside of it, right? And you're doing transactions and everything else. But I remember sitting down with the professor and I was worried I was going to get a bad grade because I was sitting there going, this is stupid. All right, why are we trying to create a Second Life? The networks were created and connectivity was created to make our first lives better. And that's where the networks need to go. They need to understand who we are, what we're doing as a consumer, what we're doing as an individual, and be able to enrich and better our lives. And so when you think about that, consumers, you think about what's happening, and we talked about a little bit in the content industry, right? In the content industry, we see things moving to having to go by 248 channels that I watch 3 or 4 out of them to being able to provide over-the-top services. And I can have those over-the-top services everywhere I go, right? So we see that movement, and that movement's going to continue to push higher capacity and higher networks that can provide that capacity as we keep moving into higher density and higher density locations where we want to consume that content. Gaming and esports. If you haven't watched Twitch, do I have any Twitch players here? Okay, another thing you guys got to check out. So Twitch is where individuals go online and they watch each other play video games. All right, so I don't know if you've heard about this, esports, and so Twitch is one of these services that offer that. So you go online and you sit there and you watch people play video games. So I have 6 kids, so you kind of alluded to it, and I have them from 27 all the way down to 3. But my 6-year-old and my 3-year-old today, when they wake up in the morning, the first thing that they do is they come to my room and they say, "Dad, can I go grab my tablet and go downstairs?" And when I go down there, they're spending half an hour at least, if I can't kick them off, and a lot of times longer than that because I'm a tired dad, but they'll spend an hour watching other people play video games so that they can play their video games better. And they're just sitting there watching each other. And there are now opportunities where people are sitting there doing that. They're going into big venues and they just sit around on screens like this watching each other play video games. And if you haven't been to one of those, it's really interesting. Some of my older sons traveled to Dallas one time and sat there for 3 days in a venue like this playing video games. So this is, again, something else that's happening. And then finally, virtual reality. If you haven't had a chance to play with it, it's awesome. So think about this. Right now, people are going to venues and they're going to stadiums. And when they go to these stadiums, you've got the seats that are down low and you got the seats that are way up high. And the ones that are sitting up way high, they're trying to watch these games and they can't see the sweat on the guy's brow as he's going and taking that hit. Now, if they had a VR camera sitting in there while they're sitting up in the upper rafters and they had the network to be able to do so, they can sit there and they can watch that game and see that sweat on the brow in the nosebleed seats up at the top. But to be able to do that, you need to have the network to be able to support that virtual reality device, so as they're sitting up there, they can end up experiencing that game. And again, they can experience that event that we want them to experience in just as a unique way and just as an experienced way, as in a different way than they can sitting out back at their couch or wherever they're at in the back. And these NBA and NFL and all these sports events, they want you in those seats because they want to build that experience. Virtual reality is going to be key to being able to build that. So, of course, the venue wants you there. That's kind of where I'm alluding to next. The venue wants it there. They want you to be able to show up at that game and use those virtual reality sets and go do that EA Sports gaming thing. But they want the actionable analytics to be able to do it. They want to be able to provide digital advertising that's unique just to you based on what your criteria is. They're going to be delivering different apps to you for your specific experience that you want to have. You know, there might be an app for single people who go to the game and an app for married people that go to the game, or young people or old people, who knows. But the key thing is all of these technologies require connection. In-seat concessions. You know, a lot of us talk about wanting to get in-seat concessions so I don't have to get up and get my own beer. But what if I want to go ahead and give a beer to that pretty girl three rows down? I also want to be able to perhaps somebody sit there and go on the little social thing on the app and say, "Hey, I'm interested in a beer, and somebody want to buy me a beer," and whatever, you got a free beer, all right? So again, all of these things are possible. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about accelerating consumption. We're talking about taking all of these things, and for people who don't believe we're going to see a 10x explosion, I mean, hopefully what I've laid out for you is that accelerating consumption is here today, and it's going to go even crazier later. So to be able to really deliver this experience, this evolutionary experience that's happening, that's personalized, interactive, engaging, transcendent, and of course, as the panel before talked about, secure, we really need to focus on building a future of convergence. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about next, is how do we build that future of convergence? And I'm going to give you a model that shows you how you do that. So when we talk about convergence, we're doing it already. So at Boingo, we've already deployed DAS, we've deployed Wi-Fi, and we've deployed small cells in venues together. We haven't figured out what, there's still stuff to figure out. How does the business model work? Some of the network management on the back end. I've been begging for somebody out there to come up with a network management system that ends up allowing me to control all of these technologies with a centralized console. Couldn't get it, so we went and built one. And I'm going to use it for a while until somebody comes out with something better, but we don't want to wait, that's for sure, because we need to be able to realize that these networks of the future have to deliver this content that's changing in these multiple different ways, has to understand what the customer experience needs to be, and then we also have to realize that there has to be some cost savings in there for these venues to be able to deploy them. And I would argue there has to be monetizational value. And this is where it comes hard, is you have to recognize that the monetization techniques we use today for these networks is changing. And Boingo is no different. When I first arrived at Boingo, we were retail Wi-Fi. Most people knew us for retail Wi-Fi. We did DAS, just like a lot of other people as long, but it was always trying to charge for leasing and then charge as a retail market for being able to get connected. And we realized that that was going to change. And we had two choices. We could fight it, or we could end up embracing it and do it to ourselves. And one of the things that if you ever talk to our CEO, he always sits there and says, if we see a trend coming, what we don't do is go hide from it. We have to sit there and go do it to ourselves first so that we understand it, and then we can end up trying to find different business models to work around it. When you think about it, in the Wi-Fi industry, we've been around since 2001. There's not very many people who've survived all the way through that, and it's because of that mindset to really be bold and go out there and find that industry that's waiting for that connectivity. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that evolution and how you get to converged networks. So again, I talked about how we've deployed Wi-Fi and DAS. Since 2006 or 7 timeframe, we ended up starting to deploy networks. In 2001 to 2006, it was about trying to figure out how to do metro Wi-Fi. It didn't, back then it was a little bit too soon. I think it's coming back now, which is awesome. And we tried to do aggregated footprints. Again, a model that you look at a lot of companies that are still entrenched in that aggregated footprint model, and it's not really, they're not being successful today. Because what we realized at Boingo a long time ago is, or I guess in 2006, was to be able to be effective in this space, you need to understand networks, which means we needed to own networks, and we needed to deploy networks so that we could end up being able to have something to provide for the carriers who we were looking at to be able to help pay for it, because that was the old model. Or in the future, it might be, as we've talked about today, the enterprises that are providing buildings like this being able to pay for it. But to be able to be effective, you have to build out those networks and understand how to bridge those different networks and connect the dots. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is I came from the cellular side. I was a consultant, so back to what Ian said, I was one of those guys who took your watch and told you what time it was, and I did that for many years. But when I came into Wi-Fi, one of the things that I recognized with Wi-Fi is it wasn't secure, seamless, and simple. It was a walled garden. It was jump through this hurdle. It was jump through that hurdle. And so we jumped. When I came into Boingo, I realized we needed to get standards involved because this is an open system. Unlicensed is open. It means that you got to use the scholarly model of a common management principle. So if you ever heard that, or if you haven't heard that, look it up. It's a pretty interesting model. But they say to be able to deal in standards-based things, you need to realize that common management principles are the way you go, and that means you need to get people together and to be able to move forward together. And one of the things we pushed then was Passpoint. We're the first ones to launch Passpoint in our airports 2 years ago. We're the first ones to get a deal with Time Warner and TowerStream roaming bilaterally on these venues. We have over 100,000 of these Passpoint networks that allow you to seamlessly, securely, and simply connect. And I heard earlier today in one of the conversations, I think right before lunch, we were talking about how hard it was to connect to Wi-Fi. Well, that's because we're using old technology. This technology, Passpoint's been out for 2 years, but we're still, some people are being slow at deploying it. It's time to deploy it. It's ready and it's there. All the devices, Apple, Google, Microsoft. All the devices are now supporting it as of this year. As of just a month ago, we announced that Android Marshmallow has it and Windows 10. So it's coming out, and what it does is it allows you to take advantage of that Wi-Fi to be able to seamlessly connect so you don't have to figure out how to do that. So again, a very good thing, and we're pushing that because we believe Wi-Fi is an important part of that whole converged network, especially when we start talking about some of these video things that we're going to do, these virtual reality systems that we want to put in to really make those experiences great. DAS, we've been doing DAS as well since 2006. When you think about DAS, when we started off, and I heard this statement before, we'd go into a venue like this, and we'd end up putting up a DAS system. We'd put in 3 sectors. And then we'd come back 2 years later, and we'd add it, and maybe we'd make it to 7. This DAS system here is 21 sectors at this stadium that I'm showing here. Again, I'm talking about this being Convergence 1.0 because we're still at that initial phase of being able to develop convergence. But what we're doing is we're putting in 21 sectors of DAS, and it's neutral host. I heard a statement somewhere that the average DAS deployment has somewhere around 2.1. I think somebody said it in previous. We're running somewhere around 3.2 carriers per DAS. Most of our DAS are in large venues when we put in our DAS systems. But again, taking what we've learned from DAS, taking what we learned from Wi-Fi, bridging that gap, then led us to our putting Wi-Fi in these large stadiums. Right? So I've got a 21 sector DAS. I've got hundreds of Wi-Fi access points to be able to do that other kinds of things that people want to be able to do, which is whatever, the virtual reality, the being able to see live content, stream other games that they're not able to see because they're sitting there inside the stadium. So we put in Wi-Fi. Again, this is Convergence 1.0. And then what we're also doing now is we're putting in small cells. So I heard this, and I completely agree with what I heard. When you're up in those top area of the stadium, you're going to want those virtual reality headsets. Just to go back to that again, you're going to want to be able to get access so you can sit there and quickly watch that replay on your device, whether it be your small phone. So putting that DAS nodes up in that top section ends up giving you that extra capacity that's needed up in that area that you're going to need. And so that's, again, Convergence 1.0. And then finally, when you go to an event, you just don't want to worry about the event that you're in. You also got to think about before the event and after the event. So what can you do? Well, you can put small cells right there in the parking lot, right next to the macro cells, so that way you have that higher capacity so people can, again, use those services that they want to use before the game or before the event, and they can experience that. And that is all Convergence 1.0, and we're doing it today. So that's the key thing, is we could sit here and we could talk about one technology or the other. We can sit there and put a competitive nature inside of it, but we really don't need to, because there's examples today, even in Convergence 1.0, where you need it and where these venues are asking for it. And we all can do it, and we can make it happen. So with that, what I'm trying to really push across is embracing this cooperative technologies, understanding that these technologies are out there and they're available to us today, and if we embrace them and if we end up figuring out how to deploy them now, it ends up allowing us to be able to build what we want for tomorrow when this technologies and some of these new services are available. You know, nobody saw the coming of the Apple iPhone, right? Nobody saw that. And we ended up thinking, oh, we're going from 2G to 3G and we're going to be okay. And then all of a sudden that phone came and we were all going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I got paid a lot of consulting money to sit here and tell you what you already knew. You need to build more